The sun hung low over the Seattle skyline, casting long golden shadows across the gleaming floor of Damon Blackwell's office. The space, like the man himself, was precise and unyielding walls of glass, furniture in clean lines of slate and steel, and not a single personal photo in sight. From 40 stories up, the city below looked orderly, small, manageable. Damon stood with one hand in the pocket of his tailored charcoal slacks, the other cradling a tumbler of water, untouched, as he watched the light catch on the sound. He wasn't really seeing the view. Not tonight. Another year, another invitation. To the Evermont Ball sat unopened on his desk behind him every spring. The legacy event gathered Seattle's richest and most powerful for one glittering evening. It was more than a party, it was a test of social currency, a curated spectacle of elegance, ambition, and scrutiny. Damon used to care, before the divorce, before the vultures. Now the thought of standing under the chandeliers, surrounded by champagne-soaked smiles, made his stomach tighten. He'd attend alone, as he had the last 2 years, stand in his tuxedo, answer questions with polite indifference, pretend not to hear the whispers about his latest product launch or worse, his personal life. The office door opened with a soft knock. Elena Carter stepped in, efficient and elegant. Even at the end of a 12-hour day, her brown hair was twisted into a low knot, a few strands escaping to frame her thoughtful face. She carried a leather folder, the day's final documents in order, as always, your finance briefing notes, and next week's board schedule, she said, placing the folder gently on his desk. "Thank you," Damon said, turning from the window. He watched her a moment longer than usual. There was something comforting about Elena, her calm, her quiet intelligence. She never sought attention, never played politics. She didn't laugh at jokes that weren't funny. In a world where everyone performed, she simply was. "Elena," he said, his voice low. She glanced up. "Yes, Mr. Blackwell." He hesitated. For a man known for billion-dollar decisions, he suddenly found himself strangely unsure. "I've received the Evermont Ball invitation." Her brows lifted just slightly. "Of course. It's next Saturday, isn't it?" He nodded. "I don't want to go alone this year." Silence filled the room like rising mist. "I was wondering if you would consider accompanying me," he added, "as my guest." The folder in her hand trembled slightly before she steadied it. Her lips parted, but for a moment nothing came out. Elena Carter did not freeze easily. But this was unexpected. She began, then composed herself. "Mr. Blackwell, that's very kind of you, but are you sure that would be appropriate?" Damon smiled faintly. "I'm not looking for appropriate. I'm looking for someone real." She stared at him, searching his face for signs of irony or condescension. There were none, only a quiet sincerity that left her more unsettled than any boardroom drama ever could. "I've never been to an event like that," she said carefully. "That world, it's not where I belong." He stepped closer, but not too close. "No, and that's exactly why I want you there." She didn't answer right away. Instead, she gathered the folder, nodded once, and said, "I'll think about it." Then she turned and left, her heels silent against the polished floor. Damon stood alone again, but the room no longer felt quite so still. The city rain came, like a whisper overnight, soft and steady against the glass walls of Damon Blackwell's penthouse office. By morning, the skies had turned a dull silver. Elena Carter sat at her desk one floor below, the rhythmic tapping of her keyboard the only sound in the early hour. She had barely slept. The question Damon asked the night before still echoed through her like an unresolved chord. "Will you accompany me to the Evermont Ball?" It wasn't just the strangeness of the request, it was the way he had asked. Not as a boss issuing a directive, but as a man asking for something vulnerable, something personal. She had seen that look in his eyes only once before 2 years ago. The morning he returned from his divorce hearing, he hadn't said a word, but the damage lingered on his face like smoke after a fire. Since then, Damon Blackwell had become the embodiment of control, efficiency, and polite detachment. And yet now, this invitation. Her computer chimed. Calendar reminders, vendor audits, performance evaluations. But her eyes drifted again to the envelope tucked into her planner. Evermont Ball 2025. Mr. Damon Blackwell plus guest. She wasn't plus guest. Material. She didn't wear Versace. Her shoes were from the clearance rack. Her mother's watch, too old to be considered vintage, was the only jewelry she wore. And the women at these events, God. The women, they were silk-skinned, bone-thin, and bred for ballroom grace. But Elena had grit and quiet confidence, and the unsettling feeling that this was more than just a dance. Upstairs, Damon sat in his office with a coffee growing cold beside him. Across from him, Preston Hale leaned back in a leather chair with the casual arrogance of someone born immune to consequences. Preston was old money and old game's slick hair, smug grin, and a knack for weaponizing charm. "So," Preston said with a smirk, "I heard you're bringing your assistant to Evermont." Damon didn't flinch. "Yes, you're joking." "I'm not." Preston laughed too loudly. "You know the ballroom has a dress code, right? And she's what? Fresh out of business school. From where is she from again?" "Renton." Damon's jaw tensed. "She's brilliant. She's loyal. And she's the most competent person I know." "Competent?" Preston echoed with mockery, drawing the word out like it was foreign. "We're not hiring a CFO. This is a ball, Damon. The kind where legacy families scout their next mergers, romantic or financial. It's not bring your assistant to work day." Damon stood, every inch of him cold steel, in Armani. "If you have a problem with Elena Carter, Preston, don't come." Preston blinked. The silence stretched. Then he gave a tight chuckle and raised his hands in mock surrender. "Touchy, okay. Take whoever you want. Just don't expect her to survive the wolves." That evening, Elena drove to the edge of town to a little boutique she had once visited with her mother. Mary Bell's Vintage and Tailor. The sign hadn't changed in 15 years. Inside, the shop smelled of lavender sachets and polished wood. Dresses from decades past hung like secrets waiting to be rediscovered. The bell above the door jingled as she entered. From the back room, a soft voice called. "Just a moment." Maribel appeared moments later, her silver hair piled high, eyes sharp behind red-rimmed glasses. "Elena Carter," she said, smiling. "You're taller than I remember." "You knew my mother," Elena replied quietly. "I did. Elizabeth used to bring you here for fittings. You always wanted the dresses with pockets." They both laughed gently. Then the air grew still again. "I'm looking for something," Elena said. "Something classic." Maribel looked at her for a long moment, then, without a word, turned and disappeared behind a velvet curtain. Minutes passed. Elena wandered the shop, running her fingers along velvet, silk, lace lives once lived, now silent. Then Maribel returned, holding a garment bag reverently. "She left this for you," the older woman said. "Told me, one day my daughter will walk into a room and make them all stare for the right reasons. I kept it for years. Thought maybe she was just romantic." Elena's throat tightened. Her mother had died 8 years ago. She had never spoken of the dress. Maribel unzipped the bag. It was unlike anything Elena had seen. Deep, sapphire velvet, off the shoulder, with a graceful sweep of fabric that shimmered in the dim light, like starlight trapped in midnight ink. "She wore it once, to a gala just like the one you're attending," Maribel said. Elena reached out, her fingers trembling slightly. "I don't know if I can wear this." "You can," Maribel said gently. "You just don't believe it yet." Back in the city, Preston was already planting seeds. He dropped comments over drinks at the club. "Damon's bringing his assistant. Brave man. I hope she knows the difference between a canape and a calamity." The social circuit buzzed, the way it always did when blood was in the water. Damon knew, and he didn't care, or so he told himself. But late that night, in the solitude of his penthouse, he stood at the window again, watching the rain fall over Seattle like a veil, wondering if he'd just invited someone he admired into a world that would try to tear her apart. And if she walked in and proved them all wrong. He didn't realize it yet, but that ball wasn't going to test her. It was going to test him. 3 days remained until the Evermont ball, and Elena Carter stood in front of her full-length mirror, the ghost of the sapphire gown hanging behind her on the door like a question she hadn't yet answered. She had tried it on once, just once, and it had fit like it was made for the woman she wasn't sure she had become yet. But with every passing hour, the pressure mounted like a rising tide. It wasn't just the dress. It was the whispers already moving like smoke through Seattle's high society. Rumors were spreading faster than she could even pretend to control. Some wondered if Damon Blackwell was finally cracking under the weight of isolation. Others assumed she was a temporary distraction. The cruelest suggested she had found the oldest shortcut to success in a man's world. Her inbox had filled overnight with messages she couldn't ignore. One anonymous email read, "You're not fooling anyone, sweetheart. Stay in your lane." Another, more pointed, "Hope you know what you're walking into. They eat people like you alive in that ballroom." Elena stared at the screen long after the messages faded. She'd worked for Damon for nearly 4 years. She had stayed late, cleaned up disasters, managed egos, kept the company afloat during boardroom crises. She knew the company's pulse, better than its CEO. But now, for the first time, she was being judged not for her intellect, not for her discipline, but for daring to stand beside power with no pedigree of her own. And beneath it all pulsed a deeper fear. What if Damon regretted inviting her? Elsewhere in the city, Damon sat on the back of a black SUV, eyes on his phone, skimming through society articles his PR team had flagged. One headline hit harder than the rest. Seattle's most eligible enigma breaks tradition. Blackwell. 2. Bring his assistant to Evermont. He stared at it, jaw clenched. The piece was thinly veiled mockery disguised as curiosity. One paragraph described Elena as a promising administrative professional who may find herself out of depth in a sea of royalty and inherited fortune. The next hour he spent making calls, first to his publicist, then to the event organizer. If anyone says one word to her that's condescending or patronizing, I want to know, understand? Yes, Mr. Blackwell. He ended the call, rubbing the bridge of his nose. This was why he hated these things. People didn't care who you were. They cared about who you looked like you belonged to. He didn't want Elena to walk into that ballroom and think she was alone. Thursday evening arrived with a strange, electric quiet. Elena returned to Mary Bell's boutique for a final fitting. The tailor's hands were gentle but firm as she adjusted the neckline. "You walk into that room," Maribel said softly. "You hold your head high. You carry your mother with you. And remember, power is loud, but grace whispers. And grace always lasts longer." Elena nodded, heart-pounding as she left the boutique. The clouds above the city gathered, thick and gray, like a storm was about to break. It wasn't rain. It was tension. Back in Damon's office, the light was low and the city shimmered below like an ocean of lights. He poured himself a drink, something he rarely did at work, and stared at the invite again. The card was embossed in gold, too, extravagant for something that would make him this anxious. He never second-guessed himself. But this time, it felt different, not because of the gala, not because of the press. Because of her. A knock broke his thoughts. Elena stepped in, still in her work attire, black slacks, a soft blouse, hair in its usual bun. But there was something different about her face, something resolute. "I need to ask you something," she said, shutting the door behind her. "Of course," Damon replied, surprised by the seriousness in her tone. "I need to know what this is," she said quietly. "Why you asked me, and what it means." He stood still, lips parting, but no words came. "I'm not afraid of people like Preston Hale," she continued. "I've seen worse, but I won't be paraded. I won't be used to make a point or prove something to your friends." He set the glass down slowly. "Elena, I didn't ask you to make a statement." "Then why?" Her voice trembled slightly. "Why me? You could take anyone. You could take a model, a senator's daughter, a CEO's widow." Damon stepped closer, not touching her, just meeting her eyes. "Because none of them know me. None of them have stood beside me in silence at midnight while I tried to save a sinking deal. None of them have handed me coffee and told me I was being an arrogant bastard when I needed to hear it. None of them have seen me lose and not walked away." Elena's breath caught. "I didn't ask you because I needed a date," he said. "I asked because you're the only person in that entire city I trust to stand next to me and not sell me out the next morning." Silence wrapped around them like a slow wave. Then, quieter, he added, "But if it puts you at risk." "Elena, you don't have to go." She looked at him, studying the edges of vulnerability he rarely let slip. "I'll go," she said finally, "but I'll go on one condition." He waited. You don't let me fall alone. If this thing crashes and burns, you fall with me." Damon's lips curled not into a smirk, but something warmer. "I wouldn't let you fall, Elena," he said. "But if you do, I'm going with you." The storm broke that night. Thunder rolled over the city, and somewhere in the dark between doubt and desire, between fear and rising courage, two people made a silent pact. They weren't just attending a ball, they were stepping into a fire together, and someone would burn. Saturday evening arrived like a dare. Seattle's skyline sparkled under the drizzle. Street lamps painted the city in liquid gold. On the 40th floor of Blackwell Tower, Elena Carter stood in the guest room of Damon's private penthouse, facing her reflection. The sapphire gown shimmered like deep ocean water, fitted to her like a secret that refused to stay hidden. Her hair, once always neatly tied back, now flowed in soft waves pinned loosely at the side. Her mother's pearl earrings framed her features with quiet elegance. She barely recognized the woman in the mirror, but what startled her more was the way she felt, not scared, not small, but ready. In the sitting room, Emma, her younger cousin who'd flown in from Portland just to help with the transformation, adjusted the clasp on the necklace. "Damn," she whispered. "If he doesn't fall over dead the moment he sees you, I will. Please don't die," Elena muttered, half laughing. No promises. Outside, thunder rumbled low in the clouds, like the city itself was holding its breath. The intercom buzzed. Elena turned, heart lurching. Emma gave her a wide-eyed nod. "It's time." Damon stood in the foyer of the penthouse, adjusting the cufflinks on his tailored black tuxedo. His nerves were already shredded, but he'd never admit it, not even to himself. He had faced billion-dollar investors with less anxiety than this moment. Then the door opened, and for the first time in years, Damon Blackwell forgot how to speak. Elena stepped out like a vision torn from memory and remade in strength. The gown caught the light in waves. She didn't look like someone pretending to fit in. She looked like someone who had always belonged. Only no one had noticed until now. Damon blinked, trying to gather himself. "You clean up well?" she offered, a teasing edge softening her own nerves. "No." "You change the room." Their eyes met. Neither moved for a heartbeat. Then Damon offered his arm. "Shall we?" She looped her arm through his, steady and composed. "Let's go." The black limousine slid through the city's wet streets like a bullet dipped in shadow. Inside, the cabin was quiet, their silhouettes mirrored in tinted glass. Damon broke the silence. "I called ahead to have you listed as a VIP guest. Security knows you by name. If anyone gives you trouble, Damon," she interrupted gently, "I'm not afraid of rich people." He looked at her, surprised. "I've spent my whole life making powerful people feel comfortable," she added, "but tonight I'm not shrinking for anyone, so don't expect me to play dumb to make your friends feel clever." He exhaled, something between a breath and a laugh. "I wouldn't dare." She turned to him. "But are you ready?" "For what?" "For them to see that you've changed." That shut him up. The limousine pulled up to the Rainier Grand Hotel, where the Evermont ball was already in full glittering swing. Elegant couples in gowns and tuxedos filed under the portico. Flashbulbs sparked. Music floated through the open doors like perfume. As Damon stepped out first, cameras snapped. But when Elena followed, the energy shifted. Conversations faltered. Photographers looked up sharply. And then they started shooting. Her. The woman no one expected. The assistant. Elena held Damon's arm tighter as they ascended the marble stairs. Whispers chased behind them like smoke. "Who is she?" "She's stunning. She's his assistant. I think, didn't she use to answer phones?" Inside, the ballroom dripped with opulence. Gold chandeliers bathed the space in warmth. Crystal vases held bouquets of white orchids and blood-red roses. The ceiling sparkled with tiny pin lights, like stars pulled from the night sky. Elena took it all in silently, the grandeur, the noise, the pressure, and then came them. Preston Hale and Marcus Langford, two men in tuxedos more expensive than Elena's. Carr, standing at the bar with champagne and smirks sharpened for battle. "Blackwell," Preston called, his voice rich with feigned charm. "You made it." Damon led Elena over. "Preston, Marcus." "And this must be." Marcus's gaze flicked over Elena like a credit scan. "Your assistant." What a bold move. Not bold, Damon replied. Smart. Preston gave a smile. That didn't reach his eyes. I hope she knows which fork to use. There are a lot of rules here. Elena stepped forward, calm as ice. I've memorized the table layout. Salad forks outermost. Dessert utensils are horizontal. If I make a mistake, I'll survive. But if you make one, Mr. Hale, well, let's hope your daddy's board seat can save you. Preston blinked. Marcus sputtered into his drink. Damon barely concealed his grin. Gentlemen, if you'll excuse us. As they walked away, Elena whispered, Was that too much? No. Damon said, smiling, that was exactly enough. Their assigned table was nestled near the stage, an indication of status. Already seated were a senator, a tech philanthropist, and the CEO of a competing firm, who raised an eyebrow at Elena with mild interest, not disdain. Conversation flowed. Damon spoke about innovation, future tech for children's hospitals. Then Elena joined in, adding clear, passionate insights about corporate responsibility, the ethics of accessibility, the success of pilot programs she had coordinated. By dessert, every person at the table was nodding. By the final speech, the senator was asking her to consult on an education panel. Damon watched, something swelling in his chest. Pride. And something more dangerous, something terrifyingly close to love. But not everyone clapped. From across the room, Catherine Monroe, heiress to Monroe Energy and one of Damon's former dates, watched. With narrowed eyes, she leaned toward Preston and whispered, She doesn't belong here, and I'm going to make sure she remembers that. The orchestra struck up the first notes of a waltz. Damon stood and extended his hand to Elena. Dance with me. Elena hesitated, then placed her hand in his. As they moved onto the floor, the crowd parted. All eyes on them. He held her close, his hands strong at the small of her back. You're winning them over, he whispered. I don't care about them, she said. Then what do you care about? She looked up at him. You. Damon's heart missed a beat. The music swelled around them. In that moment, it didn't matter who watched. They were dancing in a room full of ghost sand, setting fire to every one of them. But the night wasn't over, not yet, because somewhere near the back, Catherine was preparing to strike. And this time, she wasn't coming for Damon. She was coming for Elena. The waltz ended to polite applause. But Damon and Elena remained on the dance floor for a moment longer, still wrapped in the invisible cocoon of a conversation that hadn't needed words. Then, the crowd surged forward. Smiles, compliments, champagne flutes extended like offerings. But with every handshake, every "so nice to meet you," Elena could feel it, a pulse beneath the glitter, a hum of calculation. They weren't admiring her. They were studying her like rare bacteria under glass. Still, she smiled. She responded, and she held her posture as if the fabric of her gown was stitched from steel. But across the ballroom, Catherine Monroe leaned against the bar like a queen watching a rival approach her throne. Her red satin gown caught the light like flame, and her expression could have frozen a room in midsummer. She's impressive, muttered one of the real estate magnates beside her. Catherine didn't blink. She's temporary, Preston smirked. And yet somehow you didn't make the guest list. Catherine turned her gaze on him slowly. Because I wasn't invited to play pretend. She downed the rest of her drink, straightened her posture, and handed off the glass to a waiter. Watch this. Elena had just excused herself to the powder room when Catherine intercepted her path. The confrontation was surgical, calculated to happen between crowds, where no one could interfere and everyone could overhear. Elena, isn't it? Catherine's voice dripped with politeness. Elena paused. That's right. Catherine smiled, her lipstick perfect, her tone velvet. I just wanted to say how refreshing it is to see Damon experimenting. Elena raised an eyebrow. Experimenting? With his taste. You're not his usual type. But then again, taste evolves, sometimes for the better, sometimes not. The words landed like perfume and poison. I suppose when someone has nothing to prove. Elena replied, They don't need to perform, darling, Catherine said, lowering her voice. You're the biggest performance in this room. She leaned in. You think they're clapping because they admire you? They're clapping because they're impressed Damon trained his assistant so well. Elena didn't flinch, but she felt it. The sting. Catherine smiled sweetly. Enjoy your moment, Elena. Just know the clock's ticking, and when the novelty fades, so will you. And then she was gone, vanishing back into the crowd like smoke. Back inside the powder room, Elena locked herself into a stall and sat, her hands shaking, her heart pounding. Catherine's words shouldn't matter. They shouldn't, but they did, because somewhere deep down, Elena still questioned it herself, this sudden leap from background to center stage, from professional to personal, from invisible to unforgettable. The bathroom door opened again. Elena? It was Sophia, an older executive she'd met earlier in the evening, a woman who had once run her own company before stepping into philanthropy. I just wanted to say, you held your own out there, she said. I've been watching these rooms for 30 years. That was a kill shot. Elena emerged, swallowing her emotion. She tried to rattle me and failed, Sophia replied. Because you're not here to survive the room. You're here to change it. The older woman handed her a linen handkerchief and left without another word. Meanwhile, Damon circled the ballroom, trying not to show his own unease. He'd lost sight of Elena, and a gnawing instinct told him something had happened. Preston caught him near the champagne tower. She's handling it better than I thought, he said with mock approval. Damon turned slowly. What did Catherine do? Preston shrugged. Just a few words, nothing permanent. Damon's voice dropped. Stay away from her. Preston blinked. Are you threatening me? No, Damon said, his voice calm and razor sharp. I'm promising you. Eleanor returned just as the main program resumed. Auction announcements, speeches from benefactors, polite applause between every segment. She took her seat beside Damon, chin high, eyes forward. He leaned over. Are you okay? I will be, she said. But if she tries that again, I'm not walking away. He reached for her hand under the table, subtle, hidden from view. Their fingers intertwined. You don't have to fight alone. I'm not afraid of Catherine, she whispered. I'm afraid of what I let her words stir inside me. Which is, that maybe she's right. He turned, met her gaze. Elena, look around. You don't belong in this world because this world has never earned the right to claim you. Her chest tightened. And then something shifted on stage. Sophia Martinez, head of the foundation, stepped to the podium with a microphone in hand. We would like to acknowledge our newest contributors, she said. Tonight, I have the pleasure of recognizing someone who not only inspired our expanded outreach but helped architect it from behind the scenes. Elena blinked. Would Miss Elena Carter please stand? The room turned. She froze. Damon whispered, Go on. Her body moved before her mind could catch up. She stood. The applause began small, then rose in waves. Miss Carter, Sophia continued, has been the driving force behind Sterling's educational access initiatives. Her vision helped us reimagine how technology could transform pediatric care. Tonight, we honor her not only for what she's done but for who she's helped us become. The crowd erupted. Not polite applause. Real. Damon watched her standing tall in sapphire velvet, her face a portrait of stunned humility and restrained emotion, and felt something rise in his throat. Pride didn't cover it. It was deeper. RAWER. And far more dangerous. Later that evening, as couples returned to the dance floor and conversations turned to lighter topics, Catherine stood alone on the balcony, smoking a cigarette she pretended not to enjoy. Preston joined her. Well, that backfired. She exhaled. She got lucky. No, Preston said. She got chosen. And inside the ballroom, as music swelled and laughter returned to the air, Elena turned to Damon and said quietly, I don't care what they think anymore. He leaned in, barely an inch between them. Then, let's give them something else to talk about. He kissed her softly, but in full view of everyone who'd ever doubted, mocked, or dismissed her. And for the first time in years, the ballroom gasped for a reason that had nothing to do with wealth, or power, or pedigree. It was the sound of a story rewriting itself. The kiss had lasted only a second, a flicker of daring in a room governed by tradition. But in that single moment, Damon Blackwell set a match to decades of unwritten rules, and Elena Carter, without asking for it, became the spark that would ignite Seattle's most rigid social circle. The reaction was instantaneous, gasps disguised as laughter, raised eyebrows behind crystal flutes, smartphones quietly snapping photos, some pretending to take selfies just to capture what would surely become Monday's most viral story. But neither Damon nor Elena noticed any of it. They stood still in the center of the storm, staring at each other like the world had momentarily gone silent. The soft music, the murmurs, the chandeliers, all of it faded under the weight of the emotions swelling between them. Elena whispered, "You didn't have to do that. I didn't plan it." Damon said, "I just couldn't not." She felt his hands still resting gently at her waist, not possessive, not performative, just steady. Grounding. Then came the voice. Well, that was theatrical. Catherine Monroe appeared from behind a column, her crimson dress practically a warning flare. Her expression was unreadable, the kind of calm that came before thunder. "I didn't think Damon Blackwell made scenes," she added. "Or was this your version of a press release?" Damon straightened. "Catherine, now's not the time, isn't it?" she said smoothly. "You kissed your assistant at the most public, most photographed charity event of the season. That was the time." Elena stood tall beside him. "Maybe it's time the season changed." Catherine laughed once, sharp and condescending. "You have no idea what you've done, actually." Damon replied, his voice cool and deliberate. "For the first time in years." "I think I do." Catherine's eyes narrowed. "You think this ends with applause and slow dancing? Wake up, Damon. You've declared war on the very structure that keeps your company afloat." Damon stepped closer, voice lower. "Then maybe the structure needs to fall." And just like that, the threat was made and received. That night, as the gala ended and guests trickled out beneath golden canopies, the city sparkled with the quiet hum of scandal. Rumors spread like ink through water. By the time Damon and Elena's limousine reached the curb, several headlines had already hit private group chats. Blackwell breaks protocol. Kisses staffer at Evermont Gala. Tech tycoon's Cinderella moment. But at what cost? Inside the car, Elena sat in silence, still processing the emotional train they had crossed in just a few hours. Damon finally spoke. "Are you okay?" She nodded slowly. "Yes, just overwhelmed. I shouldn't have kissed you like that," he said. "Not because I regret it, because I don't, but because I know what it's going to cost you." Elena turned to him, her voice steady. "It's not the kiss I'm afraid of, it's what comes next." What came next arrived faster than either of them expected. By morning, her face was all over social media. Screenshots from grainy phone videos, taken without her consent, circulated with captions ranging from admiring to venomous, from assistant to arm candy. Elena Carter's fast track to the top. Modern day My Fair Lady, or PR stunt. Sources say Blackwell board is unsettled by recent personal entanglements. Elena sat on her apartment couch in sweats, clutching a coffee mug with both hands, as Emma scrolled through the feeds beside her. "This is insane," Emma muttered. "You gave a speech that moved the room to tears, and all they care about is whether you kiss the boss." Elena's stomach churned. She hadn't checked her email. She was afraid of what she'd find. But when she finally opened it, she saw something she hadn't expected. An invitation. Subject: private meeting request. Blackwell board chair. It was from Isadora Lennox, chairwoman of the Blackwell Technologies board, requesting an urgent private meeting. Attached was a brief message. "Ms. Carter, I'd prefer we speak before conclusions are drawn without your input." Elena stared at the screen, pulse rising. "They're going to make you choose," Emma said quietly, "between her dignity and her future." That afternoon, she arrived at the Blackwell Tower's executive floor dressed not in corporate armor, but in a soft gray dress with pearl buttons, the kind her mother used to wear to community meetings. It wasn't for intimidation. It was for truth. Isadora Lennox's office was glass-walled, pristine, and intimidating in its silence. The chairwoman, a woman in her late 60s, with white hair pinned into a perfect twist, sat behind a sleek desk, hands folded, expression unreadable. "Ms. Carter," she said as Elena entered. "Please, sit." Elena did. "I won't mince words." Isadora continued. "Last night's gala was a brilliant showcase. Your work and your poise was deeply impressive." "Thank you," Elena said cautiously. "However," Isadora said, tone tightening, Your relationship with Mr. Blackwell has shifted publicly. Elena nodded. Let me be clear, Isadora said. This is not a morality inquisition. I couldn't care less about Damon's personal affairs. What I do care about is the stability of the company. Board members are nervous. Investors don't like surprises. And social perception has power, even when it's unjust. Elena leaned forward. Are you asking me to step down? Isadora's gaze flicked. I'm asking you to think carefully. Because whether you intend to or not, you are now part of a narrative that can either elevate or destroy what you've built. A pause. Ms. Carter, she added, you are smart. But smarts don't protect against society's double standards. You know what happens to women who rise the wrong way in the public eye. Elena held her breath. Then finally, she said, I didn't rise the wrong way. I rose the quiet way. And the only reason anyone's talking now is because I stopped apologizing for being visible. Isadora studied her for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, she nodded. I hoped you'd say that. She said, because the board is about to vote on whether to approve a new leadership position. Director of Social Equity and Strategic Partnerships. Damon's recommendation was you. Elena blinked. But Isadora continued, if you accept, you'll have to leave your role as assistant. No more hiding, no more shadows. You'll be a public figure, front-facing. That means the full weight of scrutiny will fall on you, not just Damon. Elena felt her hands shaking slightly in her lap. Then she lifted her chin. I'll take it, she said. That evening, Damon waited on the rooftop of his building, staring at the city lights like they held answers. When Elena stepped out of the elevator, he turned, and she saw something raw in his eyes, fear, hope, everything in between. I met with Isadora, she said, and I accepted the position. He moved closer. Are you sure? No, she said honestly, but I'm done living in the space between fear and permission. Damon reached for her hand. You're about to face every critic, every camera. I won't let them tear you apart. She smiled. Then stand beside me. As thunder rolled again across the horizon, they stood together at the edge of the glass, looking down at a city that no longer owned them, and toward a future neither of them could predict, but they would meet it, not as employer and employee, not as scandal and story, but as to people who had nothing to prove, except that love, real love, does not ask for permission. It claims its place. The following Monday morning, the city moved as if nothing had changed. But inside Blackwell Technologies, the atmosphere was anything but ordinary. Security was tighter. Reporters circled the building like hawks over glass. Employees whispered in corridors. And on every digital bulletin board, two names now sat side by side under the executive leadership roster. Damon Blackwell, CEO Elena Carter, Director of Strategic Partnerships. Cheered. Some pretended not to care, and some sharpened their knives. Elena arrived early, stepping out of the elevator wearing a navy sheath dress, her shoulders squared like armor. She passed familiar faces, some smiling too much, others looking away entirely, but she kept moving forward. When she entered her new office, larger than her previous workspace by a mile, it felt both surreal and inevitable. The skyline stretched behind the floor-to-ceiling windows like an open promise, but the promise had a price. A sealed envelope waited on her desk. No name, no handwriting, just a single page inside. She unfolded it. You were chosen for optics. You'll be gone by Q3. The words weren't handwritten. They were typed, anonymous, cold. Elena's hand trembled, but her jaw locked into stillness. She didn't tear the note. She folded it, placed it into her drawer, and locked it. Then she turned to face her day. Upstairs, Damon paced his own office, eyes bloodshot from a weekend of strategic firefighting. The board had split down the middle. Half applauded Elena's promotion, recognizing her talent and connection to the company's charitable rise. The other half saw it as reckless favoritism, and someone had leaked internal files to the press emails from last year, early drafts of Damon's internal memos about employee evaluations and diversity strategy. They were twisted out of context, republished in online business exposes with headlines like, Romance or Risk? CEO under fire for mixing power and passion, token empowerment, or real promotion? Tech's gender problem grows murkier. The worst part, Damon knew it had come from someone close, someone at the table. He called Preston that afternoon, requesting a lunch meeting. Preston didn't refuse, he never did. The Hales weren't known for direct confrontation. They preferred strategy that bled quietly. They met at the Ascend, a private rooftop club with skyline views and $1,000 steaks. "I take it this isn't a social call," Preston said, leaning back in his chair with that same bored smirk. "Cut." "The performance," Damon said. "Was it you?" Preston raised a brow. "You'll have to be more specific." "Did I leak something? Undermine your assistant turned finance acuity in training? That sort of thing?" Damon didn't flinch. "I know you've always resented her, but you crossed a line." Preston leaned forward now, his voice low and venomous. "You crossed the line. The moment you paraded a staffer into our world like she belonged here. You may not care about old rules anymore, Damon, but some of us still do. So you'd burn the company down just to make a point." Preston's smile vanished. "I'd burn it down to remind you who built the matchbox." Damon stood, fists clenched. "If I find out you leaked confidential board memos, I'll see to it you're blacklisted from every firm west of Chicago." "You'd try," Preston said coolly. "But by the time you prove anything, she'll already be gone." Damon walked out without another word. Back at headquarters, Elena's day unraveled further. At noon, a junior partner from PR stormed into her office. "We have a problem," she said breathlessly. "There's a leaked internal report saying you bypassed corporate approval to donate company funds to the Children's Hospital expansion." Elena froze. "That's a lie. Damon signed off on that in person. I drafted the proposal with finance. They're spinning it, saying you authorized it without due process. The narrative is that you're using your position to build your own brand." The hospital's logo had already trended online beside hers. The implication, Elena Carter was buying her own halo. She stood slowly, pulse racing. "Who's behind this?" "No one's claiming it. But there's another problem." "What now?" "Board vote. Emergency session. Tomorrow morning. One item on the agenda, your termination." That night, she returned to her apartment for the first time in days. Damon arrived an hour later. She opened the door without a word, let him in. He looked more tired than she'd ever seen him. Tie loosened, eyes burning behind the pressure. "I'm sorry," he said. "You didn't do this," she replied, although neither of them fully believed it. "I underestimated them," he said, collapsing onto her couch. "I thought if we played it clean, did everything right, the work would speak louder than the whispers." "I should have known better," Elena whispered. "People like me don't walk into empires without someone trying to torch the ground behind them." He looked up sharply. "You are not leaving. They're voting tomorrow," she said. "I may not have a choice." "You do," he said. "You always do." Then he stood and walked to his jacket, pulling out a folder. "What's this?" she asked. "Everything," he said. "I've been collecting data for months. Internal leaks, conflict of interest patterns, side deals Preston and Marcus approved without authorization. I was going to use it in case the board ever tried to push me out. And now, he said, I'm giving it to you." She blinked. "What, if they come for you?" he said, stepping closer. "You hit them back harder. You walk into that room not asking for mercy, but demanding truth." She stared at him. "You're risking everything." "So are you," he said. "But I don't want to protect you." She looked confused. "I want to stand next to you while you burn the lies to the ground." The next morning arrived like a war drum. Elena stepped into the boardroom in a storm gray suit, her heels echoing on the marble. The long polished table was filled, 15 directors, some staring, some pretending to read their notes. Isadora Lennox sat at the head. She gave Elena a slow nod. "Miss Carter," she said, "you're aware of the reason for the session." "Yes," Elena replied, "and I'm here to respond." She pulled out the folder Damon had given her and opened it carefully. "Before you vote on my termination," she said, "I'd like to show you what real misconduct looks like." She passed copies down both sides of the table. Unapproved bonuses, conflicts of interest, private contracts rerouted through shell firms. The room changed. Silence fell like a guillotine. And then Isadora spoke. "Miss Carter, where did you get these?" From someone who finally stopped being afraid. A pause, then Isadora smiled. Let the record show that the vote for Elena Carter's termination is off the table. Murmurs erupted. Preston, seated at the far end, glared across the table. But Elena met his stare with something colder than fire. Resolve. That night, headlines hit the wires. Elena Carter exposes corruption at Blackwell Technologies. Keeps executive seat assistant turned architect. How one woman rewrote the corporate playbook. And in the quiet of her apartment, as she sipped tea by the window, her phone buzzed with a message from Damon. "You did it. They'll never forget today," she replied simply. "Neither will I," but deep inside, she knew the war wasn't over. It had only just begun. Because power, once challenged, rarely retreats quietly. And when a woman dares to rise, without permission, the world either crowns her or tries to crush her. She wasn't afraid of either. The city glistened with artificial calm. News outlets painted Elena Carter as a corporate heroine, a strategic genius who had just exposed corruption inside one of the most powerful tech companies in the world. Her face was suddenly everywhere, on panels, podcasts, think pieces dissecting her rise from assistant to executive. The woman who challenged a boardroom of billionaires and won. But inside Elena's apartment, where headlines echoed hollowly through her phone screen, the mood was anything but triumphant. She stood by the window in silence, arms crossed, watching the rain streak across the glass. Her name was now a weapon admired by some, resented by others. What should have felt like a victory felt strangely haunted. Damon stood behind her, shirt sleeves rolled up, jaw tight as he read the internal legal report on his tablet. "They're bleeding from the inside," he muttered. "Marcus is stepping down quietly. Preston's family is pushing for a non-disclosure settlement. I don't want money," Elena said without turning. "I know. They're not done," she added softly. Damon looked up. "What do you mean? They're too quiet." And she was right. The silence broke the next morning. At 6:14 a.m., Elena's phone buzzed. Not with messages but with alerts. Her personal email, her professional inbox, even her unlisted University alum account flooded with anonymous tips, questions, and rumors. False accusations. One subject line read, "Did Elena Carter use insider access to manipulate grant funding?" Another anonymous source claims Carter doctored hospital program data. Her heart hammered. It wasn't just slander. It was strategic sabotage. The links led to a whisper campaign, a manufactured PR crisis, built with alarming precision. Forums, comment sections, industry blogs were now echoing similar language, like someone had seeded the lies deliberately across multiple channels. And then the phone rang. It was Sophia Martinez from the Children's Hospital Foundation. "Elena," she said carefully, "we need to talk." Within hours, Elena was in a boardroom at the foundation headquarters, facing a dozen trustees and PR advisors. Sophia sat at the end, grave and composed. "We believe you," Sophia said, "but the optics are spiraling. Your name is becoming a political liability to our ongoing donors." Elena kept her voice calm. "So what are you asking me to do?" "Publicly distance yourself," another trustee said. "Step down from your advisory role, just temporarily, until this all blows over." Elena exhaled slowly. "You're asking me to pretend I did something wrong, to protect people who know the truth." "We're asking you to protect the children we serve," Sophia said gently. The blow landed harder than Elena expected. She rose from her chair. "If you believe silence is the only way to protect them, then you don't need me on your board." And she walked out. Meanwhile, back at Blackwell Technologies, Damon met with Isadora Lennox in a dark-paneled war room, where legal teams analyzed every angle of the smear campaign. "We traced the leaks to a private firm in Zurich," the head of security explained. "They're mercenary-level professionals, paid to erase reputations quietly." "Who paid them?" Damon asked. A pause. Isadora's gaze sharpened. "It leads to Preston Hale, but the contract was routed through an offshore shell. We can't link him cleanly. Then we go public," Damon said. "We expose it. You do that," Isadora warned, "and this becomes blood sport. The Hales don't lose quietly. They ruin publicly. I'm not letting them destroy her," he said. "Then be prepared to lose everything." That night, Elena stood alone in the rain outside the building. where she had once filed paperwork, fetched coffee, and quietly made herself invaluable. Now her photo was plastered across news vans parked out front. Paparazzi waited behind tinted windows. Cameras were watching, waiting for her to break. But she wouldn't, not this time. She turned and found Damon standing behind her, holding a folder. "They want a war," he said. She nodded. "Then let's give them one." The press conference was unannounced. No formal media invite. No corporate branding. Just a live stream, turned on without warning, drawing in hundreds of thousands of viewers within minutes. Damon Blackwell stood at the podium in an open-collared black suit, face harder than the cameras had ever seen. "The truth," he said, "is not always profitable, but it is always powerful." He detailed the smear campaign, named the shell company, outlined the pattern of intimidation, corporate blackmail, and gendered narrative manipulation. Then he stepped aside, and Elena took the mic, calm, direct, unshakable. She didn't speak like a victim. She spoke like someone who had already survived worse. "I didn't ask for this spotlight," she said, "but I will not surrender it to liars who believe wealth equals truth. I've earned every step I've taken, and I'm not going to apologize for walking through the fire, especially when I didn't light it." The stream ended with thunderous support across social media. But behind the applause, something shifted. 3 hours later, a private server belonging to Preston Hale's investment trust was mysteriously compromised. Dozens of encrypted messages were leaked to whistleblower sites. Contracts, bribes, names the house Preston had built began to crumble. And somewhere inside that collapse, Catherine Monroe's name appeared, too. She had funded the Zurich firm, not just to attack Elena but to destroy Damon's entire leadership circle. Jealousy wasn't her motive. It was revenge. For being forgotten. For being replaced. Elena received a final anonymous message late that night. Just one sentence. "This isn't over. You made enemies who don't lose." She stared at the screen, then closed the message, looked out the window, and whispered aloud, "Then I guess I'll never stop winning." Because by now, she understood something powerful. They weren't trying to silence her because she was weak. They were trying because she was finally louder than they ever expected. And that was something they could never forgive, but she could survive it. Because real power isn't given, it's earned. And Elena Carter had earned every second of the fire. And she wasn't done burning yet. The days that followed moved, like a storm on slow rotation, never striking directly, but always threatening. Preston Hale had gone underground. Catherine Monroe had gone silent. And Elena Carter had become a symbol, half hailed as a modern icon, half dismissed as a clever manipulator who had weaponized her gender, her relationship, her narrative. She had become a Rorschach test for a fractured corporate culture. People saw what they wanted to see, but behind the public firestorm, a far more dangerous fuse had been lit. It began subtly. A withdrawn investment here, a delayed contract there, anonymous compliance audits, arriving at Blackwell's international branches within days of each other, unannounced inspections, silent investigations, foreign regulators suddenly interested in past philanthropic tax exemptions. Isadora Lennox, always calm, now sat at board meetings with her lips pressed together like a general, waiting for the first explosion. "This isn't just revenge," she said one afternoon as she, Damon, and Elena met in a locked conference room. "This is systemic. Coordinated. Someone wants the entire company destabilized from the ground up." Damon leaned over the table. "We trace the disruption, freeze all executive-level accounts, reevaluate legal firewall protocols." "We already did," Isadora said, sliding a file across the table. "This came in from the cybersecurity firm this morning." Elena opened it. Inside, a single screenshot. An internal Blackwell executive login had been used to authorize several offshore wire transfers to days earlier payments that aligned with the patterns of the Zurich mercenary firm. The login ID, E. Carter. Director, her breath caught. "That's impossible," she whispered. "I never made those transfers." Damon took the file, eyes narrowing. "This is planted." "Of course it is," Isadora replied. "But proving that in time is another story. If the press gets hold of this," Elena began, "they will." Isadora cut in. "That's the point. They all went quiet. In one move, the unseen hand had flipped the narrative. From Elena the whistleblower to Elena the embezzler. By midnight, the headlines were already spreading like oil on fire. Carter caught in transfer scandal. Internal Blackwell audit underway. Hero or hacker? Tech darlings fall from grace begins. Elena sat in her apartment, laptop open, heart racing. Every corner of her digital identity was under siege. Her social accounts were flooded with vitriol. News hosts debated her morality. Former classmates posted long threads about her ambition, always bordering on arrogance. Emma called in tears. Elena, they're saying you stole millions. I didn't, Elena said quietly, too exhausted to explain. But that won't stop them. Across the city, in a penthouse lit only by the flicker of streetlights through glass, Damon stared out over Seattle like he could force it to make sense. When the intercom buzzed, he answered instantly. Elena, he said, voice already tight. I need to see you. He opened the elevator. Minutes later, she stood before him, pale but burning with fury. They used my ID. That means someone had access to the secure vault. Someone inside the company, he said. No, she corrected. Someone close to me. Her voice cracked on the last word. I trusted them, Damon, every calendar, every password reset. I left pieces of my life unlocked because I thought. She broke off. He crossed the room and pulled her close. You are not to blame for being human. She leaned into his chest. They want to bury me. They can't, he whispered. Because you're already out of their reach. No, she said, pulling back. I'm not until we bring them into the light. He looked into her eyes and knew what she meant. It was timed out the next day. A secret weapon entered the war. A woman named Delaney Reese, former senior compliance officer at Hale Capital, contacted Elena directly. She had seen the media storm. She had once worked under Catherine Monroe, and she had receipts. Delaney met them in a dim-lit downtown cafe, sunglasses on, voice low. They've done this before, she said. At least twice. Silenced whistleblowers, buried leads under fake investigations, bought off auditors. I quit after Catherine blacklisted a junior analyst for flagging a political donation scheme. She handed over a flash drive. Everything I could take without getting caught. Emails, call logs, client interactions. Damon stared at it like a live grenade. This could destroy them. No, Delaney said. This will expose them. Whether they're destroyed is up to you. That night, Elena stood alone on Damon's rooftop, the city stretching far below, beautiful and cruel. I thought I knew what power looked like, she whispered. But it's not noise, it's silence, the kind that hides things so well. The truth sounds insane when you finally say it. Damon stepped beside her. Then let's make the truth louder. She looked up at him. If this works, we might lose everything. He nodded. But if we don't try, we've already lost who we are. And so they began. A digital bombshell dropped the following morning. Elena published a public letter, not through a corporate press release, but via a grassroots platform built for whistleblowers and industry survivors. In it, she detailed everything. The forged transfers, the hacked ID. The coordinated sabotage. She didn't frame herself as a victim. She framed herself as a warning. To every young woman told she rose too fast. To every employee punished for being excellent without permission. And the closing line became legend. I was never out of my depth. You just never imagined I could swim. By afternoon, a federal investigation had been launched into Hale Capital's offshore accounts. Catherine Monroe's private jet was denied landing clearance. In 3 states, Preston Hale's father publicly disowned him on a live business channel, calling his son's actions a disgrace to the family legacy. And Elena, she walked into Blackwell HQ with her head held high. Damon met her at the elevator. This time not as her boss, not even as her partner, but as the one person who had always believed. She was never meant to sit behind the desk. She was meant to build the whole damn room. And now, the room was listening. But the final battle still waited in the wings, and it would demand more than just courage. It would demand everything. It began not with a press conference or a leaked document. It began with a phone call. Damon Blackwell stood in the middle of his office, the skyline of fogged memory behind him. As his legal counsel spoke the words that changed everything, Preston Hale was arrested this morning. Charges include financial fraud, conspiracy to obstruct federal investigations, and unlawful surveillance of a private citizen. Catherine Monroe is cooperating with the FBI. Damon didn't speak. The words settled like ash. But inside, something shifted. Not relief. Not triumph. Something deeper. Something like the weight of justice finally finding its landing. He looked out the window and whispered one name, Elena. She was already waiting for him in the new conference hall of the recently reopened Sterling Innovation Center, a philanthropic division Elena had built herself over the last year. She stood alone, reviewing final notes for the keynote speech she would deliver that night. Tonight wasn't about revenge. It was about reinvention. It had been 12 months since the gala, 12 months since she walked into a room where no one believed she belonged, and changed the course of an entire empire. In that time, she had weathered the storm of false accusations, survived 3 federal audits, declined a book deal, launched a non-profit for workplace ethics, and signed global partnerships for ethical deployment. She had not just survived the fire, she had become it. When Damon arrived, she looked up and smiled. He stood in the doorway silently for a moment, just watching. "I heard," she said, "about Preston." "It's done," he replied. "No," she said softly, "it's ending. There's a difference." He stepped closer. "You were right. They didn't want to beat us in court. They wanted to ruin our names, piece by piece, but they forgot," Elena said, her voice steady, "that we never worked for their approval, just for the truth." That night, the ballroom glowed again, but this time, it was their name on the banners. The Blackwell-Carter Initiative, Building Ethical Futures, Media. Presence was high, but the tone had changed. The whispers were gone. In their place, admiration, respect, curiosity. Elena stepped to the podium in a midnight black gown, the room falling silent. She didn't read from a script. She spoke from memory. From pain, from victory. "There was a time," she said, "when I believed power belonged only to the rooms I was never invited into. I believed that impact had to come from inherited names and polished pedigrees. But I've learned something different." She paused. "Power is not about control. It's about responsibility. And legacy doesn't begin with wealth. It begins with courage." She looked out into the sea of faces, many who had once doubted her, and courage is contagious. Applause, standing ovation. But the loudest moment came later, after the gala. Damon pulled her aside, away from cameras, into the quiet garden courtyard. The city lights reflected in her eyes as he took her hand. "You were never just my assistant," he said. "I know," she replied. "You weren't just my partner either." "I know that too," he exhaled. "But what I haven't told you, what I never had the courage to say, is that you're the reason I became the man I was supposed to be." She looked at him then, eyes soft. "I didn't need you to save me," she said. "I know," he whispered, "but I wanted to stand beside you while you saved yourself." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Elena blinked. "You don't need this," he said. "You already have a life you built with your own fire. But if you let me, I'd like to walk with you through all the rooms we're not supposed to enter." She opened the box. Inside, a ring, simple, elegant, bold, like her. Tears welled in her eyes, not because she needed the proposal, but because it was offered not as validation, but as partnership. "Real. Equal. Unshakable. Double quotes. Yes," she whispered. And this time, it wasn't applause that followed. It was silence, the powerful kind. The kind that only comes after a war is won not with vengeance, but with vision. Epilogue. 2 years later, Carter Blackwell Foundation for Leadership Equity opened its doors in a new glass building along Seattle's waterfront, a symbol not of wealth, but of change. Elena stood on the rooftop garden, watching a group of young interns arrive for orientation. Among them was a girl with second-hand shoes and big eyes, the same girl Elena had once been. Damon stepped beside her, their daughter asleep in a carrier against his chest. "Do you still remember it?" he asked. "The gala." She smiled. "Every detail. You walked into that room like the world didn't scare you." "No," she said. "I walked in like I was done letting it." He kissed her cheek, and together they looked out over the city, the one that once doubted her. Now it bore her name, not because she demanded it, but because she earned it. One step, one truth, one fire at a time.